Hello, hello. Welcome back to Seedy Sundays with Max and Pietro.
We could start like that. Go on, episode started.
You do the editing, yeah, Pietro. So that's the start. If you want it to be the start, that's the start.
All right, that's the start. G'day. Welcome back to Seedy Sundays with Max and Pietro. Can you tell before the end of this episode who it is that's seedy on this Sunday? That's the
Could be both
game
of
we
us.
can play with our audience. Could be both of us. It's not today. It's one of us. I'll let you decide. One of us is seedy and hungover, and the other one has been waiting for 30 minutes. 30 minutes to start this episode. So could be anyone. Could be anyone that was waiting. Could be anyone that's seedy. Again, we'll let you decide before the end of this episode.
No comment.
But welcome back to our listeners. We are still Collectivitis. We're not Seedy Sundays. We are still dissecting the disease that is collectivism in various states of hangover form this week and every week. So it's just us today again. We had someone last time, but we had another solo episode not that long ago, and I think solo episodes are good. We get to talk about stuff that's been happening. So what's been happening with you, Max?
Everything and nothing. Fresh as a daisy today. It's a beautiful Sunday. I'm not seedy, unlike a certain somebody else.
That's weird. I'm also not seedy.
Oh, it's got to be one of us.
The mystery continues.
No, lots to talk about, Pietro. There's QANTAS in the news. Alan Joyce being a fuckwit like usual. The date has been announced for the referendum for the voice. A few other little bits and bobs going on. What are you thinking?
Well, let's start with QANTAS. Let's start with Alan Joyce. I mean, I'll let you add him first. What do you think of Alan Joyce? You clearly have some strong opinions about him.
He's just annoying as fuck. He's just a little leprechaun. He whinges and sooks and asks for government bailouts because he doesn't know how to run a business and likes to fucking rake in a huge profit for himself. I saw a good analogy the other day that was like, if Qantas is taking all these bailouts from the taxpayers, why are they not returning the profits to us?
Well, I mean, why does every single corporation that gets bailouts not give the profits back? Why would they?
It's a good point. It's a good point. They should. This is a much higher profile story, though. You know, it's been in the news, so it's just at the forefront of everybody's mind right now.
All right, let's scale it back. Let's start from the beginning of this bad boy. So, it starts with the fact that I bought a new car. And the reason it starts with that is because I have had a shitbox car that was as old as I was for my entire adult life. And the radio stopped working on it years ago. And I never replaced it, which means that I wasn't listening to the radio. And I don't really watch, mass media, sort of mainstream media on TV all that often. The most of the time that I watch it is if I'm doing research for a podcast just to see what people are saying. And now my new car does have radio. So I have, for my sins, been listening to ABC radio again for the first time in yonks. And amazingly, the things that they're talking about are all sorts of different topics. Most of them I find are kind of small scale. Like this Qantas thing, they've been harping on about it for weeks now. I normally wouldn't be all that interested in this. I think there's much bigger things happening around. If we talk about like libertarian issues, libertarians should be talking about like the Russia-Ukraine stuff, for example, inflation, for example, even the US election and what's happening there, which we'll get into a little bit later, for example. But this Qantas stuff has been everywhere. And I think there's actually a lot of really good libertarian insights into this. So, well, let's first look at what it is that's actually happened recently with QANTAS.
There's a few more chapters to come, Tim. Look, the big issue is how does Qantas move on? Unless they resolve the issue of Alan Joyce's 24 million, they can't let him go with 24 million, Tim.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It is. It's embarrassing for people who are struggling to pay rent and their mortgages. It's ridiculous.
Correct. And under his own KPIs, which determine his bonus, he can't have succeeded. The ACCC has a $250 million claim against Qantas. The ACCC says it's the most complained about company in Australia. It's beset with loss of commercial travellers and the like. They can't move on until that bonus is addressed. The chairman's role.
Cool. So essentially, what they're saying is Qantas standards have been dropping in terms of their customer service standards have been dropping for quite a while. There's a lot of lack of customer satisfaction. They recently, so the CEOs and Alan Joyce has given himself clearly some enormous bonus. Not only this is on top of that bonus there, he's been increasing his wages and whatnot, and all the sort of people higher up, whilst they've been firing and lowering wages of employees. Okay. They've had $500 million of unpaid flight credits from COVID cancellations that they gave, which is the kind of, I think that's the straw that's kind of broken the camel's back, is that everyone's infuriated about.
That would be what the ACCC are investigating, isn't it?
Yes, yeah. And then but also, like, you have to remember that these guys are an enormous corporation, which is absolutely hand in hand with the government. You were talking before about handouts. They received $2 billion of support just in 2021 alone. And so that was, to do with the flight cancellations that occurred throughout that year, but they would have received more in 2020 and who knows how much more they've received in other years. But that was just in 2021, they received that much. So it's kind of the notion that Qantas is a free market company, free market corporation that operates in this region by supplying good services is something that's absolutely false, and you can see that right away. But what's also interesting, and the reason I saw Jordan Peterson even tweeted on the Qantas stuff, is that so Alan Joyce is now finally resigning. Now, Alan Joyce is quite infamous for having turned Qantas, or for having led Qantas towards becoming this really woke corporation. Like they comment on, they've thrown it all in behind the yes vote to the Indigenous voice to Parliament. They ran Pride Flight. They did this Pride Flight commercial earlier in the year during Pride Month, in which it's like all like, the gay pride thing on an airplane, like flying all at once, and they broadcasted that as their commercial. They did they did the vaccine mandates all the way through 2020 and 2021. And the thing Jordan Peterson was upset about was that they did a welcome to country while they were landing. They had a little video which was a welcome to country, which again is just absurd pandering to identity politics. And all of this is might have been surprising maybe 5 years ago, but the more we go forward, the more big corporations all fit into this same woke ideology pushing stuff. And I think it's kind of a little bit interesting to dissect why that is. Why do you think that these woke corporations are all pushing the exact same agendas?
Because it puts them on the right path to get handouts from the government.
Essentially, that's half of it. So the way I would look at it is just kind of a longer way of arriving at that same point is, okay, so the state wants to grow. We talk about the state all the time. The state is constantly searching for ways to grow, irrelevant of which of the two major parties is in government, both here and abroad, here and in the US and anywhere else. And the best side at growing the state is leftist ideology. They increase the public sector, increase all of that. And the left is incredibly good at playing identity politics. They thrive off identity politics. They thrive off essentially subliminally pushing the idea that it's more important to be part of your identity group, now whatever that may be, and that your status as this is more important than your status as an individual. And that's this idea of the collective versus the individual. And so they push all these ideas that hey, we have to look after people who are gay, or part of the queer community, or part of the minority of non-white. In the US, there's a lot of push for Hispanic, and then there's the Black Lives Matter, and then there's the Indigenous group, and they're all victims, and they're all part of their group identity, and and then as women as well, there needs to be preferential treatment in hiring of women, the diversity hires, and there's all these various groups. And even if you're a straight white male, you have to be sympathetic to various.
Well, we're so oppressed as straight white males now, aren't we?
Well, I mean, essentially, if you're looking at going for the same job and having the same qualifications as someone else, you are technically oppressed, because you have a less likelihood chance of getting hired, because they need diversity hires, and they need, to in search of this egalitarian ideal, you as a person and someone else who is exactly the same as you in every aspect, but has one of these preferential characteristics, will get hired before you. So all of this is to say that because the state benefits from having identity politics pushed, these large corporations, as you said, who rely on state handouts, have every incentive to then do the bidding and push these identity politics ideas. And what they also have is none of the cost, none of the risk associated with it. Because if you think of how the free market should work, the free market, in a non-corporate, non-monopolistic society, you as a consumer get to pick who to give your business to. And if there is something like, if there was a market for, pushing for gay pride, now let's not call it gay pride, let's say equality of sexuality, which maybe in the past homosexuals were oppressed, and there was a push to try and fix this, and companies who were pushing this were getting consumers on board because people wanted to make these changes, then that would be an organic way of social change occurring, right? But what we've gotten to the point now is where it's irrelevant of what consumers want. Whether consumers want this or that or the other thing, it doesn't matter, because these corporations rely on enormous funding from the government, and they get to monopolize the fields that they're in, regardless of whether consumers want these things or not. For example, with Qantas, whether you agree with all the woke shit that they're pushing, you have to fly Qantas on most of your flights, especially certain routes where they have paid and lobbied the government good money to ensure that they're the only ones, or among the only ones who can fly these routes.
It's just what else has been revealed this week was the Qatar Airlines or Qatar Airways have been banned from certain routes, or they're limited to how many planes they can fly per day because Qantas want the business.
Exactly. And that was the next point that I was going to move into, is regardless of how badly Qantas does, and regardless of how much they push bullshit that maybe most people aren't interested in, regardless of how horrific their customer service is becoming, they, using protectionism and using monopolies created by the government, get to have preferential treatment anyway. And Qatar Airways were meant to bring in asked to bring in some new flights. And Catherine King, our member in Ballarat, is actually the transport minister who made the decision that Qatar wouldn't be allowed these extra flights. And this was exactly what Qantas had been lobbying the Albanese government prior to this. And this decision was actually made in June. But with all of this coming out, Catherine King has doubled down and defended her decision. But this was not because of that. It's not because of this reason and whatever. But they've done exactly what it is that Qantas wants them to do.
Did you give any reasoning though?
No, she was very tight-lipped. She said, we don't normally share the exact reasons for these things because it's to do with different governments and government relations, and it's not something that we share publicly. There was also Qatar Airways, there were some women who had really invasive strip searches done on them, which and they shared their story, Australian women at Qatar Airways. And this was part of the, Catherine King described it as this was the context around which the decision was made. It wasn't a factor in the decision, but it was part of the context, which is to say, officially I can't say it was because of this thing. But again, doubling down on, hey, here's this woke-ish reason. Like, we're talking about human rights, and we're talking about, the sexually oppressive nature of Qatar and all of this, and we're for liberation and, all of this, to give an excuse for why Qantas, despite being awful, gets to continue to have monopolies thanks to the government. And the broader point that I kind of wanted to make on this as well is that there's this really incorrect idea among people who either aren't libertarians or don't understand libertarianism, that characterizes libertarianism as being, okay, let's say we have a free market society, then all that's going to do is create monopolies whereby, you know, companies rule the world and companies get to monopolize everything and they treat everyone like shit. But monopolies in a free market, and this is the myth that I want to dispel, monopolies in the free market, in an actual libertarian free market, couldn't occur. Let's use an example. Let's use an example of a huge monopoly that people often talk about. Let's say, you know, fast food is a good example. So if you talk about McDonald's, right? McDonald's, biggest fast food chain in the world, enormous. In theory, should be able to monopolize. They have more stores than anyone else. They have stores all over the world. Why can't they corner the market and why can't they monopolize the market? Because fast food is, and I'm sure there's regulations and I'm sure there's ways that McDonald's cheats anyway by using government power, but it's fairly easy to open a fast food store for a small business owner. And so while maybe no one can compete with Macca's on the global scale, your mum and pop shop can open a fast food store around the corner in your neighborhood, and there's local fast food stores or food stores everywhere in the world that compete with McDonald's on a local level. And this competition is still the free market providing the best possible service to the most amount of people, because if McDonald's were able to provide a food service that is either cheaper or better or more efficient or quicker than every single mum and pop shop or small business store in the world ever could, then none of these businesses could exist. But the fact that they do exist is that on a local level, they can compete. Maybe they make better burgers. Maybe their service is quicker. Maybe the atmosphere in their store is more pleasant than McDonald's. There is some reason, there is some value that they provide to customers that allows them to compete with McDonald's. And if they couldn't compete with McDonald's, if McDonald's completely destroyed the rest of the market and every single fast food store became McDonald's, that would have to be, without government interference, without regulations, the only way that could happen is if McDonald's found a way to make the best possible burger for the lowest possible price, for the best possible value for everyone, and no one else could beat them at this game. And if that happened, and this is the thing that people struggle to believe, if something like that happened, which is impossible, but if something like that happens, who is the person who benefits the most out of anyone?
The consumer.
It's the consumer. Correct. It's the consumer. And so in the free market, the as ardent and competitive as they can be, if there is a monopoly, it means that no one can compete for the same consumers, which means that the consumers are winning. They have the best possible value that is humanly attainable. Now, this doesn't happen, of course, because there's always, in an unregulated market, in anything, there is always the opportunity for, whether it's on a global scale or just on a localized scale, to compete. And therefore, that forces McDonald's to keep its services good. McDonald's can't pull out a shit burger and shit, take forever with the food, because otherwise they would lose in local areas against all the local stores and lose business overall. The only way that monopolies can occur is through government, saying, hey, we're going to buy this service off you, or this service is public and it's rendered by this group, or through regulations, they cut out anyone who doesn't fit in these regulations, and therefore only the government assigned corporation can compete in that area. And we see that all the time. And so it's these corporations that have no reason to compete with the general public, with the broader free market, who can be as woke as they want to, and for them, all the benefits are in that direction, are in the direction of being woke.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Any other thoughts on that?
Not too much. I'm interested to hear what we think about, apart from the fact that, obviously Qantas and other big corps pander to the government to get these handouts. What do we think, or how do we feel about receiving handouts from the government after the impacts of COVID, with the government killing businesses and saying, hey, here's some money to help you survive because we killed your business for 2 years?
Do you mean like small businesses?
Well, in general, Qantas received a shitload of support. But they did also, borders were shut, so they did lose a lot of business from not being able to run flights.
Yeah, no, I get your question. And broadly, what COVID was an example of there was far more money was spent by governments to pay off corporations than was to pay off small businesses.
Yeah.
Because essentially, if the corporations were playing along and were agreeing to the lockdowns and all the hysteria, then the government was able to push that as policy. If the corporations weren't happy and were losing money, the government wouldn't have been able to do any of the lockdowns and anything, because you can't stop the economy and force all these corporations to not have any money, because then they'll leave their support for you. And so there was the corporate welfare and corporate bailouts during COVID were enormous, far bigger than small businesses, because and the average person, the job seeker and that sort of stuff for the average person, because the government didn't have to care about what a small business owner said about lockdowns or whatever. You couldn't open your business because there were lockdowns. And if you did, you had to do it secretly outside of the government. So they didn't need the support of local business owners individually. What they needed was the support of corporations saying, hey, this is the rule. Hey, lockdown. Hey, be safe, be kind, keep us apart to keep us together and all that bullshit. And part of the reason, and it always comes back to economics and it always comes back to money. If the government didn't have the mechanism of printing money for free through the Reserve Bank and through quantitative easing and all of that, if they had to do it through taxes and they didn't have these subversive mechanisms, they would never have been able to push all of the lockdowns, and they would never have been able to push all of this other stuff, because the corporations and all the other people who needed to be kept paid and who needed their palms greased to go along with the whole agenda wouldn't have had the money that they needed to. That's why COVID is referred to as the biggest transfer of wealth from the middle class to the mega rich of all time, because of all the new dollars that were printed, both in Australia and in the US. In the US, I think something like 80% of all of their currency there was an extra 80% of all currency printed during COVID. And all of this money, or the vast majority of this money, goes in towards paying corporations and paying the big megalomaniacs who need to make money to keep their palms greased and all this. And all of the value of that money, as we've talked about before, comes from the savings and the money that's already in circulation in the average person's savings account. So it is horrific in that sense when you kind of break it down. And this is exactly what Qantas was a part of. And there's a reason why they had mandates, and there's a reason why they pushed mandates and all the rest of this shit. And there's a reason why, because they were getting their palms greased to do it.
Any of our listeners know of any big corps who opposed the COVID hysteria? Let us know, because I'm just trying to think off the top of my head right now. I can't think of any.
Man,
Not in Australia.
In practice for this episode, I tried looking up like which corporations have gone woke, which corporations they all have. If you look up like any corporation of the biggest ones in the world or in Australia or whatever, look up like their name and then like followed by pride or followed by like I don't know, climate change or whatever the fuck you want. They are on board with all of it, despite these issues being extremely divided among average people.
It'd be interesting to see a list of big corps that have gone woke, and then like the same list of corps pre-2020, because any that didn't support this hysteria and this agenda, they probably just don't exist now. So it might be harder to find them.
Yeah, an interesting one. So there's like this, there's the saying, go woke, go broke, which is actually completely untrue, especially when it comes to corporations, because if you go woke, you don't go broke, because there is never a point where the average, the consumer gets to pick to make you go broke. And if they want to, even if they want to, so many of these corporations have gone woke in some way or another. The two interesting ones that I was looking at before, which is kind of funny, but it's not. So Raytheon and Lockheed Martin are two of the biggest weapons manufacturers in the US. And they push the whole military industrial complex. They give billions of dollars in donations to politicians so that politicians will vote to increase military spending, which in turn increases the size of the military, increases the amount of weapons that they buy off these weapons manufacturers, leads to the US having the largest military in the history of the world, and leads them to pushing wars all over the Middle East and pushing Ukraine and Russia to war with each other. The reason there are real people dying, getting torn apart by machines, both innocents and soldiers and people forced into these battles in Ukraine and Russia and the Middle East, is because these weapon manufacturing companies, hand in hand with the government, exchange money, give money to politicians, and get contracts and all of this is done for pure profits, and all of this is done anti-competitively through corporations and monopolies and all the rest of it. These disgusting, evil, horrific organizations, and both of them had gay pride floats at all the pride parades in the US all throughout this year. If you look up Raytheon Pride Float, you look up Lockheed Martin Pride Float, you'll find both of them with their pride floats celebrating diversity and inclusivity, and everyone has a right to, speak their truth and all this shit, while they are funding and causing the ripping apart of human beings across the entire globe. So, yeah,
apart from Russia and Ukraine, there's no gay people in the Middle East, so they don't need to worry about that. Killing people over there. They're not killing gay people.
And if there are, they're making sure they all die just like everyone else, because that's that's what they do best. So, and there's so the other example. So often corporations don't have to compete, don't have to apply themselves to the consumers. There's the big example recently of how Bud Light had put Dylan Mulvaney, who's that trans activist guy, as their spokesperson. Guy. Well, he is a guy. He's pretending to be a girl, but
sure,
he was he became the spokesperson for Bud Light, and immediately Bud Light got boycotted by everyone in Middle America. And it was an example where it was easy to boycott them because it's just a beer. It's easy to switch beer. It's not easy to switch away from corporations that you don't even know how you're paying them. And are getting paid directly by the government. But Bud Light lost a huge amount of money, and that was an example of where there is some opportunity for consumers to have a say, and they can get easily activated and easily informed. There is a huge potential, and there is a huge backlash to trying to push these agendas on people who disagree with them. But the truth is that Bud Light made a stupid decision. They were very not in tune with what their actual consumer base was and wanted, and made a huge misstep. But the truth is that for every Bud Light, there's 1,000 companies that go woke and don't go broke. They don't even
go woke, go broke is definitely bigger, more of a local level. It's the small shops, like those mom and pop shops you're talking about. They're the ones that go woke and probably go broke more often than big corps.
Well, that's true. That if there was a local shop like that who went woke just purely because they see all the big corps doing it and they think, oh, well, this is how you must get the business, and then they happen to do it in an area where there isn't a lot of sentiment in that direction, they end up ironically being the ones who go broke, despite being the ones who are probably least at fault for any of it. Yeah. That's where people can get their vitriolic satisfaction by boycotting someone through. But anyway, yeah, that's the whole story. Well, that's not the whole story, but that's mainly what I wanted to talk about, to do with the QANTAS stuff, and how I guess the libertarian insight and all of that is that despite the sort of granular, immediate at the moment thing where people are talking about how Alan Joyce has done this and that and the other, like the whole system and the whole apparatus behind all of it is so broken and it's so corrupt. Whoever is the hamster or the weasel, whatever you called him, at the helm at any given point, they're obviously going to be a terrible person because they've sold their soul for money, and sold out all of the country and taken all of their money. But it doesn't really matter that whoever actually is at the helm, much like with politics in many ways, it doesn't matter at all.
So what you're saying is this is all in vain?
All of it's in vain. No, I mean, it's not in vain because people need to be aware of this thing, but at the moment there isn't a lot of maneuverability or room to improve stuff. So let's do a rotation to another topic, which is, so we haven't talked about the US in a little while, or rather we haven't talked about Trump specifically. We talk about the US every now and again, but Trump is an incredibly interesting figure always. I think Trump is the biggest thing that has happened in our lifetimes in terms of like changing the direction of politics. I don't know if you remember, prior to 2016, there was kind of like this feeling that this push of the left and progressivism and your woke corporations and the government and all of this, and everything was heading towards a more progressive society. There was this inevitability to it all, and two things happened in 2016 which rocked everything. The first was Brexit. Brexit happened and Britain chose to leave the European Union. And the other one was Trump getting elected. And both of these things were things that were not meant to happen. All of the mainstream media tried to paint these things as horrific, racist and neo-Nazi and all the rest of it. But they both happened. And since then, Trump, whether he deserves it or not, has become kind of a lightning rod or a focal point for anti-establishment sentiment. Now, I mean, in his presidency, what Trump actually did was not that, like, he wasn't that great. He ran the way he ran, the things he was saying, like the drain the swamp and talking about how crooked and how horrific everyone who all the politicians who currently exist and how corrupt they all are, and how Hillary is, crooked Hillary and all the rest of it. He spoke very well, but once he got in, he actually wasn't very good at doing anything, and he didn't know how to actually affect any of the changes that he wanted to. He did several things incorrect. So he campaigned on ending wars, and he didn't end any wars when he was in office. He tried to end one, and he didn't start any new ones, which I suppose he's the only president in like the last 20 years not to start any new ones. But he certainly didn't end any, and he wanted to end Syria. He didn't drain the swamp in any conceivable way. He went along with all of the COVID hysteria. He pushed lockdowns. He pushed I think he pushed mandates. I think he maybe spoke against them, but he certainly started Operation Warp Speed for the vaccine, which, and he was immensely proud of everything he did there. And so he was on board with all of that. And, even the vaccine, we were talking about corporations before, the vaccine was an example of an enormous transfer of wealth to pharmaceutical companies, which are the biggest corporations and monopolizing corporations in the world. Pfizer made billions upon billions upon billions of dollars. They made like the most amount of money that's ever been made in the shortest amount of time possible. So there's all these. So he didn't go against any of that entrenched power of corporations. In fact, and went along with it. He surrounded himself with the wrong people. He signed up. He had James Mad Dog Mattis as his military guy. He had Fauci as the head of the medicine aspects. He kept Comey in power, which Comey ended up as the head of the FBI ended up persecuting him later, and is what he's pushing against him now. So he didn't surround himself with any of the right people, and he was hounded throughout his entire presidency by the Russia hoax that he was, in bed with Russia, which with the Durham report in May this year was proven to finally have been all actually conjured up by his political enemies. So, throughout all of this, he had an extremely turbulent presidency in 2006. And in the meantime, the whole of the media is going against him. Now, all of this is prelude to say that what is happening with Trump right now is even more insane. Like, it's crazy what's going on with Trump right now. He started this campaign for presidential election without a lot of steam. I don't know. Do you remember Trump towards the beginning of this, like when DeSantis and stuff were running?
Well, he wasn't even certain that he was going to run, was he? He didn't really announce it for a while, did he?
Trump announced fairly early. He announced before DeSantis, but sort of when they both kind of had started taking a bit of pot shots at each other towards, I don't know, maybe April this year. I don't know if you remember, but Trump sort of looked like he'd lost it. He'd lost the spark that he had. He was he kept attacking DeSantis, and DeSantis wouldn't attack him back. DeSantis was sort of like, oh no, I'll just talk about how good I am, and Trump was like, DeSantis he's a lockdown governor, even though Trump had pushed the lockdowns way more than DeSantis, and DeSantis was actually one of the best on COVID. But Trump it looked like he was still talking about how the election was stolen, which he's still talking about that's not changed. But it kind of seemed like he'd lost that thing that made Trump exciting. He wasn't anymore like the anti-establishment guy. He was just a guy who was angry at everyone and he was just trying to do whatever he could. Then they started indicting him, and then they started accusing him of things. And since then, his not only has his support skyrocketed, because once again, they have said, the establishment, both sides, the Republicans and the Democrats have said, we can't have Trump. We don't want Trump. Anyone but Trump. Trump is who you are not allowed to have. And if you're middle America, if you're the average person who thinks they are fucking me, they are, doing everything they can to destroy my life and my family, my way of life. They are destroying everything around me. My dollar is being devalued at breakneck speed, and there's nothing I can do or say about it. In the meantime, I'm getting pushed with all this woke stuff, and my kids are getting pushed with all this woke stuff, and I hate everything about what the government is doing. And they tell me I'm not allowed to elect that guy. Guess who my guy is?
It's him.
Guess who my guy is? It's him. I'm going to elect that guy.
And do you think all his indictments have like sparked the fire in his belly to run and like properly put his foot in it?
I think his foot was always down. It's just given him the perfect opportunity. And to his credit, so all the things that Trump doesn't do well, we mentioned before. So he didn't end the wars. He surrounded himself with the wrong people. He didn't drain the swamp. He went along with all the COVID hysteria. The things Trump does well, he's exceptionally good at marketing himself. He is a genius at marketing himself. He just knows how to connect with the thing that middle America is upset with. And he wasn't doing that for a little while earlier on. And now that it's clicked, he is bang on fire. At the moment, he is saying all of the right things, even from a libertarian standpoint, even from a libertarian point of view. He is talking against Russia, Ukraine. He's saying that the most important thing there is to stop the conflict, is to stop people dying. Stuff that, the establishment is inconceivable to them. They're like, what do you mean we're not going to have this war? We have to have this war. For someone with Trump's standing to be saying we need to first and foremost stop human beings dying is awesome. The question with Trump is always,
will he follow through?
Will he follow through? Does he mean anything of what he actually says? Because the only evidence we have is him saying all of the right things in 2006 and not being able to do any of them.
Yeah, 2016.
Because he wouldn't. Yeah, 20. What did I say?
2006.
No, yeah, 2016. So him saying all of the right things and not being able to do any of them. So we'll see. He's managed to tap into the zeitgeist of like the blue collar, working class, middle America. That is what he's exceptional at. And I just wanted to, and recently the bigger news has been also that he got arrested, and they put a mugshot up of him. He was released within 2 hours. He was on bail within 2 hours, but he was arrested, and there's this mugshot of Trump. And I think that the mugshot is like, even that, Trump, they wanted him in looking, pale and scared, and I don't know what they want. I don't know what they hoped to get from this mugshot of him, his opponents in both the Republican and the Democratic establishment. But what they got was Trump looking like a rock star, furious, staring down this camera, with vengeance in his eyes, with that, like the look of I'm fighting for you. Look what they're doing to me. I am your hero. Like Batman, vengeance personified. And it was just like, you could not have fucked that up more. He's now selling merchandise with that mugshot of him. He hasn't posted to Twitter for years and years and years now, because he's got his Truth Social. They're paying him to be on that, and Twitter had banned him prior to Elon Musk. He posted on Twitter for the first time since like 2020 with this mugshot of him saying, it was stolen. I'm coming back. I'm fighting. Like this, he is a genius at marketing himself. And whether you like him or not, it's kind of like he doesn't even know what he represents in terms of like the fight between all of the governments and the state everywhere, and the average person is kind of like these two massive bodies that are in conflict, and it all converges for some stupid reason around this weird orange man who thinks he's God's gift to the world. And again, he's really good at tapping into saying the right things, especially under election time. And I had another video of him talking just a few days ago about, recently there's been talk about COVID coming back. I don't know if you've heard. There's been sort of some talk about potentially having lockdowns again and potentially having masks and stuff come back in, and suddenly there's talk again about, hey, make sure that you've got your booster and make sure that you're vaccinated. And maybe it's less so here than in the US, but you've got to feel like this is certainly happening in the US, because there's an election coming up in the US. Like this is the way that they're going to throw Trump under the bus again. So just in terms of him saying all the right things, I'll just play this video where he is saying all the right things.
The left-wing lunatics are trying very hard to bring back COVID lockdowns and mandates with all of their sudden fear-mongering about the new variants that are coming. Gee whiz, you know what else is coming? An election. They want to restart the COVID hysteria so they can justify more lockdowns, more censorship, more illegal drop boxes, more mail-in ballots, and trillions of dollars in payoffs to their political allies heading into the 2024 election. Does that sound familiar? These are bad people. These are sick people we're dealing with. But to every COVID tyrant who wants to take away our freedom, hear these words: we will not comply. So don't even think about it. We will not shut down our schools. We will not accept your lockdowns. We will not abide by your mask mandates. And we will not tolerate your vaccine mandates. They rigged the 2020 election, and now they're trying to do the same thing all over again by rigging the most important election in the history of our country, the 2024 election, even if it means trying to bring back COVID. But they will fail because we will not let it happen. When I'm back in the White House, I will use every available authority to cut federal funding to any school, college, airline, or public transportation system that imposes a mask mandate or a vaccine mandate. Thank you very much.
Well, like usual, he says the right things. Let's see if, one, let's see if he gets elected. Two, let's see if he follows through. I'd just love for him to come out one day and say, I was wrong on these things in the past. Like, because he's coming out and, like, we spoke about how he pushed Operation Warp Speed. He was the one that brought the vaccines in. He allowed lockdowns and mandates to happen effectively. And now he's coming out and speaking against them. I would just love some sort of admission of guilt. Like, oh, hey, sorry, I fucked up. I didn't stop this from happening in the first place.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. Like, the big takeaways here are, yes, he's absolutely correct. Like, going hard against them, possibly even talking about lockdowns and mandates, is absolutely the correct thing to do. And that is something that is, been demonstrably proven as being horrific and did nothing and was terrible. But the elephant in the room is he pushed all of that.
Yeah.
He was part of pushing all of that. And he went along with all of the COVID stuff, and he kept Fauci as the head of the CDC for the entire time that he was president. And if he is going to say those things now, there is immense hypocrisy in him not saying, by the way, I got them all wrong last time. And that's kind of the elephant in the room, is if he's saying, hey, this is what I'm going to do if you elect me president, I'm going to fix all of these things. You kind of have to, the automatic question that comes up is, well, you were saying you were going to do all those things in 2016 and you didn't do any of them. Are you at least going to mention any of that again? And I think that's essentially the big question mark around Trump is, I certainly don't think he's anything like what a libertarian ideal for a president would be. I think he represents what a lot of liberty-minded people are feeling, and his voter base probably represents a lot of liberty-minded people are feeling. I also think that the way he destroyed the hegemony of left and right in 2016. He destroyed both the Republican establishment candidates and the Democratic establishment candidates, and no one wanted him, and he went against all of it, and he broke politics. He broke US politics in a way that no one else ever has. And I don't think, politics can never be the same again. Like, the Republican Party is now enamored with this man that the Republican establishment hates, which is awesome. Like, what he's done there is through very little actual foresight of his own. He's just done it through ego and winging it. But what he's done is incredible for destroying the hegemony of the left and the right.
When are the primaries? When do they announce I mean, Trump's a shoo-in to win the Republican nomination, but when is it announced?
So I mean that's the question
when they vote?
Is whether he'll be allowed to run. Like, how will they get rid of him if he continues to go up in the polls every time they indict him on something new? Will they actually throw him in jail? Will they let him run? Like, these are all enormous questions. I forget exactly what the date is, but Super Tuesday is like one of the most important campaigning days of the primaries. It's like the day when most of the states vote, and the day leading up to it is one of the most important days of campaigning. That also happens to be the day where he has been charged and has to appear in court, like legally has to appear in court that day that is the biggest day of campaigning. Like, what a coincidence that is, that Trump is going to be unable to campaign. And that's the other thing that they might do, is they might hamstring him with all of these legal time up in legal knots where he can't appear anywhere and he can't give rallies and he can't give speeches, and eventually loses momentum because of that. Who knows? I doubt that'll happen, because every time they do something, he's so good at marketing. It's me against the world.
Yeah, he just bounces back stronger.
That's exactly the message that people are looking to vote for. They just want to vote for someone who is breaking the system apart in some way, because otherwise they are completely powerless. It's how I would describe Trump is he doesn't fix anything. If you elect Trump, it doesn't fix anything. He won't be able to. He might improve things slightly compared to the alternative, but he doesn't fix anything. It's not the solution to any of this. But Trump is the equivalent of taking a big old shit in the White House. Just someone taking just a big old shit on the president's desk. It's this guy who is not presidential, and he infuriates all of the right people. All of the people who are furious about Trump again are all the correct people that I want to make furious.
Yeah, good point. He doesn't necessarily fix things, but him being in this is the, it's almost taking the approach of the people who voted for Biden or Hillary, because it's like, oh, I don't like them, but it's better than the alternative. But Trump being in there doesn't fix things, but it is better than the alternative, which is the woke agenda and all the other bullshit that comes with Biden, Hillary, the left. You know,
it's a repudiation of all of that. It's saying we reject that. Now, you don't, as we were talking about before, and I suppose this is how it connects the two ideas brilliantly. We have no way of, through either our vote or our wallets or our, where we buy or where we go, we have no way of rejecting the woke agenda of the corporations and, this bullshit that they're pushing and all of the state growing in every way that they want. We have no way of rejecting that. Voting for Trump is a way of rejecting all of that. Now, it doesn't solve any of that. It probably doesn't do anything. But getting him in as president is just a huge middle finger to all of the people that you want to give a middle finger to. And just purely for that reason there, for that sake of that, I feel like it's exciting. I
got so much joy when he was elected in 2016, just being able to stick that middle finger up.
Yeah. Oh, that was one of the most and it'll never be as good as 2016, because in 2016 that was a complete shock.
Yeah.
No one thought that was going to happen. That was like on that day when
remember the news rolling in, he like won Florida, and it was just like, whoa, okay, this is real.
And that realization that no, she was going to be the first female president. She was meant to be. Like, history took a wrong turn. History was already written.
I get so much joy just picturing like her as the votes rolling in Trump's winning states. I'm just imagining her in a room just fuming and like blood boiling, the way Hillary does.
And just beating the shit out of Bill Clinton.
She definitely wears the pants in that relationship.
Well, he doesn't wear his pants around the White House, that's for sure. Doesn't wear his pants around Monica Lewinsky.
Oh boy.
Yeah. But anyway, so Trump is he's not a solution, but God, he's fun. And all of this US, and like even when we were talking about Javier Milei and how like exciting all of the Argentinian election stuff is, and how wild all of it is, like their parties in stadiums and their politicians are, it kind of makes all of our politics look so boring. Yeah. Like ours is, it's corporate will, and it's corporations just quietly and professionally sounding, saying, you know, talking about each other and like, you know, politicians arguing and it's all just so lame and just like G-rated.
I think
Whereas
a lot of that it can come down to like just the complicity of Australians and that she'll be right attitude. We just
exactly.
It's so good in so many factors, but in other factors, it's kind of shit, that she'll be right attitude, because we just let people walk over us.
Yeah, and yeah, we're not into that you know, over the top, super spectacular aspect of politics. To us, you know, a politician, you just want him to, you know, he'll do the job and he'll argue for me and he'll defend me and he'll pork barrel in my region. I just want things that'll make me happy. Whereas like over there, the whole, because of the whole spectacle of it all, like people are not only, it's like a reality TV show that they live every moment of their life. Like you go out into their neighborhoods and the streets are drawn up with people with either Trump banners in their front yards or like Biden banners, and it's you know, everywhere you go, it's all of this surrounds it, and you can understand why. You can understand why everyone is so much more bought in, because the state in the US is the biggest, most powerful state in all of human history. And so who wins is actually super important. And it has an actual enormous effect on the immediacy of everyone's life. And not only that, but it's like a film script. It's like the most absurd film script. They are trying to arrest someone, and they're throwing everything they can, all the powers of the government and the CIA and the FBI and all the corruption. We haven't even gone into the Hunter Biden laptop story, which they concealed at the last election. They censored it through Twitter, and that was part of the Twitter files, and they censored it through Facebook and everything to stop that story coming out and being publicized, when a high proportion of people polled later that they would have changed their vote if they'd known that story at the time, enough that Trump would have won that election. Like,
and then when Trump says the election was rigged, this is what he means. And a lot of people can't grasp that. Like when Trump comes out and says the election's rigged, the general public and like the narrative of the mainstream media push is that he just thinks that, oh, they just made up all these numbers and votes and said Biden won. It's like, no, this is what he's leaning to. It's like orchestrated.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's rigged in probably 100 different ways, and probably both sides rig it, and everyone tries to rig it in whatever way they can. It's just who can rig the most without getting caught the most. But yeah, so all of this, like, it's such an enormous spectacle that you're living it, and you have to be so much more involved in if you are in the US, and it just makes all of everything to do with their elections so much more I don't know, entertaining. Yeah. Entertaining is probably the word. Not exciting, so just entertaining than what we have here.
Not quite as big a scale as the US, but we might need to start talking about New Zealand soon. The ACT party there, the libertarian or most libertarian party there, is doing quite well for themselves and really putting a foot forward for their next election.
Yeah. That's something that we'll actually have to keep an eye on, because it does look like they're polling really well, and it does look like, I think they've got some decisions to make there, whether to join with the right-leaning party and form a coalition government, or whether to stay as the balance of power, which would probably be better for them.
Yeah, the stats I think show at the moment that if they were to form a coalition, like they're a shoo-in to win the election.
Yeah. Well, that's right. They have to choose whether to form government, but then worry about being absorbed within this other party and not getting to make decisions. Well, kind of like with the Nationals here.
Would kind of explain, because I do follow them on Instagram, and I was a little bit like mostly they're libertarian. Like the vast majority of things they push are anti-establishment and whatnot. But there's a few things they posted about tackling youth crime, and it was just a very like anti-libertarian approach on crime. It was just like, let's put the foot down and put everyone in jail, basically. And I was just like, oh, come on, guys, that's
I think
approach.
I think they're more populist than just a straight up libertarian, like the Libertarian Party.
I searched their website to see if it states they're libertarian anywhere, and it doesn't. Like their principles and values are like I said, 90% libertarian, but they don't explicitly state that anywhere.
See, that's, I think they're certainly not as libertarian as like the Libertarian Party here or the Libertarian Party in the US, and not being explicitly libertarian leaves wiggle room, which is part of the reason that it's important to have, you know, a name like the Libertarian Party, which ties you down to the ideology. I also think that libertarians like us are so excited for any scrap of good news that, you know, we're willing to jump on board with someone who's even close to libertarianism. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with them. I think they're certainly probably awesome and a lot better than anywhere else in many ways. But it might just be a bit of an example of us trying to find some light in the darkness, because
Good point.
there is so much darkness. And that's kind of the thing. Like, for some people, that light, you know, everyone who's an individual who's living in this world, who sees, you know, the growing cost of living, the devaluing of their dollar, how hard it is to, you know, pay your rent and buy a house and raise a family, and then that those kids are indoctrinated in schools, and all the millions of ways that the government and the powers that be are oppressing you. For everyone, the idea is you're looking somewhere to find some light in the darkness. And for some people, that's Trump. For some people, that's, you know, okay, if he wins, maybe that'll be something changed. For some people, you know, the ACT doing well is like, oh, there's some libertarian hope there. Javier Milei, there's libertarian hope there. And it's true that there does seem to be a lot of focal points of hope and for hope. But it comes out of desperation because broadly, unfortunately, you know, these are exceptions. The rule is just this status quo of slow encroachment and slow indoctrination everywhere.
The light in the darkness surrounding Trump is just his skin reflecting. That's what it is. It glows in the dark.
Yeah.
I noticed in that video, he's looking quite bronze. He's ditching the orange to like he looks like a statue now. He's just.
Yeah. I think he's got a slightly different haircut too. He's slightly adjusted his hairstyle. He's maturing, Trump. He's
How old is he? Like 70 something?
Yeah, he's quite old. I think he's like 76 maybe. But I mean, doesn't he look so much better than Biden?
And Mitch McConnell.
Biden's only like 3 or 4 years older than Trump. I can't remember exactly. Trump might be 78 and Biden's 81 or something like that. But God, they look decades apart.
Mm-hmm.
And Mitch McConnell had another one of his episodes.
He did.
His shutting down episodes.
He's on his last legs, that man.
Yeah, well,
he's seen some shit. When he pauses, I feel like he's walking towards the white light, and then he's just being like shaken and woken up, and he's just falling back out.
He's just trying to get to that white light, and someone keeps jabbing him with a COVID vaccine, and it just
keeps
keeps
saving
saving his life. Yeah,
absolutely.
Keeps saving his life, and he's just like, God damn it, I was free that time. But no, 8th booster, you're still in it, brother.
Oh, jeez. All right, Pietro. I think that's the hour mark just about. So we should probably leave it at that. We've got a little bit of stuff for next time. Like we spoke about, voice referendum coming up. Something we were going to tap into, but we won't now, I don't think, is some state land being handed back to Indigenous groups. But we'll get some more info on that and talk about it next time. And it could tie into the voice a little bit too. So.
Yeah. No, that we definitely want to do a few episodes on that sort of stuff. So yeah, stay tuned. There's good stuff to come. There's lots more to talk about, and we will be bringing you more.
Yeah. Hey, I might be a bit MIA over the next month or so. So if there's a few episodes without me, it's because I'm going to be overseas. I'm going to the Socialist Republic of California. So I should try and see if there's any Trump rallies in town. I'm not sure if he goes to California or not though.
I mean, from what I understand of California is the more you stick to like the big cities like LA and stuff, the more Democrat leaning it is. But the further out country you go, the more Trump land it is. So you can be our reporter on the ground while you're over there. That'd actually be really cool. Yeah,
the closer to the city you get, the more democratic you get, but the more people shitting on the street you get. So that's like. You just have to make sure that if I'm reporting live from the ground, I've just got to like watch my step because I may step in human feces.
No, I'm actually really jealous. It'd be awesome to see what the feel is like on the ground there. It'll actually be kind of heating up under the election.
I was in the US in 2017 and I got a photo in front of the Trump Tower in New York. So I should try and dig that up. That could be the new podcast photo.
Yeah, well, we can use that as the thumbnail for that episode where you're in Cali. Cool. All right. Well, for those of you who don't already, you can like us, follow us on Spotify, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, all the rest of it. Hopefully you enjoyed this and stick around. Here's some more next time.
Adios, amigo.